Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
So we are in the double portion Chukat Balak. We read these parshiot together this year. On a leap year, when we add 4 more Shabbatot, we would read these separately. So there's a lot to pick from in these parshiot. So let's look at this part, chapter 19. God speaks to Moshe and Aharon, saying, Zot chukat haTorah asher tziva Adonai lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael vayikchu elecha Farah Adumah tamima, asher ein ba mum asher lo ala aleha ol. This is the Torah instruction of the chok of that God commanded, saying, tell the people Israel that they should take a red female cow that is
Rabbi, we don't have the right page.
Amy, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's right now we're seeing part of the email, the Google Chrome, like a Gmail inbox, but we're not seeing the Parsha.
Well, that's too bad.
It looked okay at the top, but that's not there.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes.
Yes?
That's correct.
All right.
Thank
so
you.
this is the Torah, Zot, right? HaTorah. This is the instruction. Chukat. This is about a chok. Chukat, the chok of God's commandments. So what chok are we dealing with? A chok, we're going to get into what that is. There's chok and mishpat, 2 ways to talk about commandments. Right now we're dealing with what Torah tells us is a chok. And it's the Farah Adumah tamima. The people should take a heifer that is red, and the rabbinic tradition says all red, which means there's not one hair on the cow that is not red, which is rare. For a red cow is rare, and there being no other color at all is really rare. Tamima, pure, meaning there's no blemish on the cow. And the cow cannot have ever had a yoke laid on her. So she's never been used for work, ever. And you shall give it to Elazar the priest. So if one of these cows is born, it goes to Elazar the priest. It's taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. So when the cow is born, it is watched and tended and not used at all for, work until it is slaughtered. And then he's going to take Elazar some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle it 7 times toward the front of the tent of meeting. It will be burned in his sight, its hide, flesh, and blood, the dung included. So this is like an olah, right? This is a holocaust. The whole thing is burned up. Then the priest is going to take cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson stuff and throw them into the fire consuming the cow. Where have we seen this before? Cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson stuff. These are used in the ritual that purifies the leper, the person suffering from tzara'at, right? The mitzorah, the one suffering with tzara'at when they are brought back into the camp. These are the things used, cedar wood, hyssop, and there's a ritual done with that. And same, the hyssop was dipped in blood, if you'll recall, at the Exodus. Hyssop was dipped in blood and put on the doorpost for the Israelites to leave that night, in the morning. But that's how they mark the door at night as the angel of death comes through. All right, so we know this combination of stuff, and this combination of stuff is used to purify from serious contamination, right? Mitzorah, like that tazria, the tzara'at, the diseased tzara'at is very, very serious for the Israelites. So is corpse contamination, and that's what we're dealing with here. There's contamination from having tzara'at. The only thing more contaminating than that is a corpse, and that's what we're dealing with the red heifer. We are dealing with purification from corpse contamination. Okay, so you're going to throw this stuff into the fire that is burning the offering of the red heifer. The priest shall wash his garments and bathe in water after burning the cow. After that, the priest may re-enter the camp, but he shall be impure until evening. So interesting. The priest who's involved in creating the thing that purifies from corpse contamination is rendered impure by the process. Okay, so think about that for a minute. The one who performed the burning shall also wash their garments in water, bathe, and be impure until evening. So the priest who's watching that everything is done correctly is rendered impure by this process, as is the person who actually does the offering of the cow. Someone else who is pure shall gather up the ashes of the cow and deposit them outside the camp in a pure place to be kept for water of lustration for the Israelite community. It is for purgation. Okay? So it's a chatat. It is to deal with chet. It is to deal with the ick, right, that comes from corpse contamination. The one who gathers up the ashes of the cow shall also wash their clothes and be impure until evening. This shall be a permanent law for the Israelites and for the strangers who reside among them. Everybody involved in creating this purification stuff, the ashes, everybody involved in that is rendered impure by the process only until evening. All right. Anyone who touches the corpse of any human being shall be impure for 7 days. They shall undergo cleansing with the ashes, meaning the ashes of the red heifer, on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and then be pure. If they fail to undergo cleansing on the 3rd and 7th days, they shall not be pure. Whoever touches a corpse, the body of a person who has died, and does not undergo cleansing, defiles God's Mishkan, that person shall be cut off from Israel. Since the water of lustration was not dashed on them, they remain impure. Their impurity is still upon them. This is the ritual. When a person dies in a tent, whoever enters the tent and whoever is in the tent shall be impure for 7 days. And every open vessel with no lid fastened down shall be impure. So that means in a closed space, if you're in the closed space with a dead person, everything in that space becomes impure that's open or living for 7 days, automatically. But also, lest you should think it's because you're in a closed space. And in the open, anyone who touches a person who was killed or who died naturally, or human bone, or a grave, shall be impure 7 days. So both in society, right, in homes, and in the open, forever, it's contaminating. Some of the ashes from the fire of purgation shall be taken for the impure person, and fresh water shall be added to them in a vessel. Then someone who is pure shall take hyssop, dip it in the water, and sprinkle on the tent and on all the vessels and people who were there, or on the one who touched the bones, or the person who was killed or died naturally, or the grave. Right? So it's put on people who were in a closed space with a dead body, and on vessels that were not fastened shut. And it's sprinkled directly on anybody who touches a bone or a grave. So the 3rd day and the 7th day, and then at nightfall, they will be pure. If anyone who has become impure fails to undergo cleansing, that person shall be cut off from the congregation for having defiled God's sanctuary. The water of lustration was not dashed on them. They are impure. That shall be for them a law for all time. Further, whoever sprinkled the water of lustration shall wash their clothes, and whoever touches the water of lustration shall be impure until evening. Whatever that impure person touches shall be impure, and the person who touches that one shall be impure until. Okay. So, any questions so far?
So did they do this in late afternoon?
Because
when it says impure until evening, it seems to me like it's the whole day. But if they did it at 5:30, they'd be impure for an hour.
Right.
There's this whole sense that somehow purity and impurity are like things that go through the air.
Yes.
Enter things.
Yes. And the Mishnah spends a lot of time on what kind of vessels communicate impurity and which don't.
If there's a vessel, right, and it's shut closed, the outside of the vessel is not impure.
Correct. Yep. And again, the Mishnah takes this up in great detail. And it's transferred then to the laws of kashrut, right? If it can communicate impurity, it also can communicate meat to dairy. So you can't use it for meat and dairy, right? Because it absorbs the substance. Pam?
The Parsha opens with, this is the Torah of the Hukim. Why does it go out of its way in this instance to say this is the Torah?
So this is the generic Torah, meaning instruction.
I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, we have. We've seen it. Yeah, Zot Torat. This is the Torah of the priesthood or of the sacrifices, right? So we see this word, generic Torah with a little t, mean teaching, instruction.
I see.
And so this is the instruction about the chok, that is Parah Adumah. What is a chok? A chok is a law that you could not arrive at without being commanded to do it. A mishpat is a law that you could eventually get to through reason if you're looking to live a life of justice and holiness and whatever. That's how the rabbis define chok and mishpat. So for instance, honest weights and measures, is that a chok or a mishpat? It's a mishpat, right? Because you could get there, right? A society that doesn't use honest weights and measures, right? That you can see how you might get to that law using certain principles. Chukim are things you would not get to, no matter how long you think about it and, right, how enlightened you are and how much a life of holiness and justice you want to live. You wouldn't get there on your own. It took God to command it for us to know about it. Bert?
Just quickly, it's interesting that they go into so much detail, but in laws like love your neighbor as yourself or don't steal or have, good measures, there isn't all this detail. I know it gets put in the Mishnah, but it's interesting in Torah. A lot of what we consider some of the greatest laws of the Torah, honor your mother and father, don't have this long explanation.
Yeah, well, partly because it's not a procedure. The Parah Adumah is a procedure. And so and having just been through a bunch of procedures, I get it. Let me just say I get it. Like every single time I would show up for my procedure, the list of questions included, have you had any falls recently? Do you have any suicidal thoughts? So I just started answering the next question before they even asked it. I'm like, and I feel safe at home, right? So like, it's a procedure. It's procedure, and this is what they do every single time, even though they just asked me those questions 2 weeks. So that's very much what we have here, is the outline of the procedure, and the procedure has to be followed exactly for everything to come out okay. Because it's serious. Corpse contamination is serious and brings major impurity into the camp. And we know the divine presence can't be where there's lots of impurity, right? So this is very serious for the community.
Also, in some ways, we could go on and on forever about how to honor your parents, or it's just a simple, everything connects to that one sentence. So maybe it's just that and that alone.
Right. And it's not a ritual, right? Like it's orient yourself in the world so that everything you do vis-a-vis your parents is respectful, right? There isn't time to list it all. And for everybody, it's going to be different what that looks like, I would imagine, right? So for all that, like Alex said, it's so big that you can't really give a Torah about it, honoring your parents or whatever. Okay. Although the rabbis do. They go on and on about not stealing means don't take someone's time. If you know you're not going to buy their product, don't have them go through the whole rigmarole because you're stealing their time. And if you don't quote your teacher when you put forward something, an idea, then you're stealing from your teacher. So that's why we always teach in the name of who we learned it from, because otherwise it's stealing. So so they do.
I just asked a question, Amy.
Yeah.
Is there something, this may be totally off the wall, but in cremation, obviously there's ashes. There was something about ashes in here. And we don't do cremation. I don't know if it's even addressed in the Torah, but would that make it by definition impure? I mean, does it have anything to do with ashes, the ashes of a human being?
Yes, the ashes of a human being would presumably render one impure, but that's not something they were concerned about
because they didn't do it.
Because they didn't do it. Exactly.
Though I'm sure it was done.
Yes, by
yeah.
neighboring, peoples for sure.
Yeah.
Because we know that from Greece around the same time,
Right.
that they were doing
Right.
it. So, but presumably ashes contain bone fragments, and bone, we just got told, contaminates.
Does purity only have to do with the temple?
It only has to do, yes, with the sacred space of the camp, because God's presence is in the camp.
Without the temple, it's irrelevant. I mean, there is no purity and impurity.
So funny you should ask, because that's correct. Without a temple, without the red heifer, without sacrifice, there's no way to render us pure. Yet, people who trace their lineage through Kohen, being Kohen, a priest, they won't go into a room with a dead body because of corpse contamination. So I get it that there's lots of ways to do Jewish. I totally get it. It's one of the ones that makes me a little crazy. I got to tell you, we're all impure. There is no way to be pure now. So what are they worried about? They're not about to go offer a sacrifice because there's no temple, right? So what are they worried about? Corpse contamination. It makes me a little crazy. I think it's a way for them to hold on to their special status, as Kohen. And I find it insulting and whatever. But again, if it's meaningful for them, goes into hate. All right, well, let's look at what's meaningful about some of this, that I picked it and went here. If we look at Avital Hochstein, she says, contact with death, according to the Israelites, defiles in the private sphere, right? So in the tent, if you're in the tent with a dead body, beyond the bounds of society, meaning out in the field, which we read, and even when this contact has been organized and controlled, contact with death in any of these contexts demands a response. Moreover, our Parsha suggests that a dead body is a defiling entity under a wide range of conditions. Immediately after death, so not just where it is, but when. Immediately after, as well as a long time after, as in the case of a bone. The corpse defiles, but so does the grave. In practice, our Parsha clarifies that a dead person, anywhere, anyhow, anytime, continues to defile. Nature, culture, private and public spaces, they are all affected by and involved with the presence of death. With all of this in mind, she says, our Parsha demands a process of purification after contact with the dead. This demand implicitly reveals that the effect of life's contact with death are reversible. Even though a person touched a corpse, was in the same room or shared space with the dead and is now impure, there is a pathway to purification. Put more directly, what it means to be alive is to be capable of becoming pure after contact with death. Yes, the dead defile forever, no matter how much time has passed. But a living person can toggle between states of impurity and purity and can be renewed after contact with the dead. Our Parsha does not present this possibility for purification as a neutral option, as a mere description of a difference between the living and the dead. It is rather a normative demand. Those who come in contact with or proximity to death must respond to it. They may not remain indifferent, neutral, and unaffected. The encounter with death must trigger action, not paralysis. One cannot hide from the encounter with death, nor may one sink into it for a prolonged period of time. This demand comes across loud and clear when the Torah describes the consequences of not dealing with the reality of death, right? Which we just read. Corpse impurity is connected to the realm of the sacred. The existence of a dead body and a living person defiled by it both affect the sacred domain. Put another way, the relationship between death and the sacred is mediated through the impurity of death. Whenever the impurity of death is found for a prolonged period of time in the camp, in the midst of the community served by the sacred, that impurity defiles the sacred as well. So what is Avital Hochstein saying? A bunch of stuff. she's saying there. First of all, a dead body always contaminates, meaning the presence of a dead body is always affecting the realm of the sacred forever. What does that say? That says that the death of a human being impacts the community forever. I think that's beautiful. I actually think that's really beautiful. That, what does she say? She's saying we must deal with the death of a human being, and the presence of a dead human being impacts everybody that has contact with it, proximity to it, including and especially the realm of the sacred, because the sacred is all about life and connection to life. So when we have contact with or proximity to a dead human being, that has to be dealt with. It's not neutral. It is the highest form of dysregulation possible. I love this. When I do a funeral and I see that body with the family before we do the funeral, because they have to identify the body, it's in California, that's the law, we have to look at the body. So I do that with the family. And then we bury that person. What Avital Hochstein is saying that this Torah is coming to teach is that should impact us. I can't just go get a hamburger afterwards, which Chaim and I do very often. So what am I saying? I love this idea that whether you knew the person or not, it doesn't matter. Whether that death impacted you emotionally, psychologically or not, doesn't matter. The death of a human being impacts the status of anyone who comes into contact with it. I think that's beautiful. And it's forever. Our presence as a dead person continues to impact the community long after we're dead. I just think that is one of the best ways of expressing how important human life is to Torah and to our tradition. Okay. That it's dysregulating. A dead human is dysregulating. When the image of God is dead, that is the most disruptive kind of tum'ah you could possibly have. Alex?
I'm wondering also, of course, when this is written and all the iterations after, now we have a better understanding. I mean, I'm assuming so often they had proximity to death because people didn't live as long and there was disease and all these. So it was even more important in that way. It's not that it's less important, but now we have a better understanding. There was so much risk involved, especially being around dead bodies or if there was sickness or disease. And I'm wondering if that's been a little diminished as time has gone on, since we live longer and we have more science available to us. Not that we have more science available to us regarding the mysteries of death and all that surrounds that.
So I want to suggest it's the opposite. We have become so, my brain shut down, I can't find the word. We've become so indifferent to the reality of death that we warehouse our old, we warehouse our sick.
Sanitized.
We sanitize, thank you, all of it. We put them in hospitals and have them die in hospitals. And now we're starting to get it about hospice, right? And I think Torah is saying, Dafka, people who were more exposed to death, don't get callous. Don't have it be habitual. Even if you see it a lot, even if you see it all the time, don't allow yourself to become unimpacted. You are impacted. You are impure.
So how do you navigate as someone, a part of clergy, as you're saying, we go get a burger? Like, you got to compartmentalize maybe if you're clergy. It's not that I don't know. Yeah, how do you navigate that, Rabbi Amy?
I think my point about that was I make sure to stop when I'm pulling out of the cemetery and I wash. So any Jewish cemetery you leave, you'll notice that there is a place with flowing water and a handheld vessel that you use to wash, like before you eat. Right? The ritual hand washing before we eat. You'll see one of those things, double-handled usually, by running water, because it is customary to, when you're leaving the cemetery, to ritually wash, to purify yourself, because you have been around the dead. So even though we're all impure and there's no way to become pure, there is still this awareness that you've just been around dead people. And so you wash. So I make sure to wash. And when I get to the Shiva house, if I'm going right from the cemetery to the Shiva house, I wash at the Shiva house as well, as a way to say, the hamburger I'm about to eat after doing this funeral, there's something that has to happen first before I touch that food, because I have been impacted by the death of a human being, whether or not I was close to them, whether or not I knew them, whether or not they meant anything to me. It's a human being. And proximity to a human not alive should register for us. And that's what I find beautiful about Hochstein's take, right, on corpse contamination. Rachel?
For me, this is what Hochstein said, and this passage taps into the parts of Torah that I love so much, that they tap into something so primeval. I'm rereading the Odyssey. And so maybe I don't know. Alex, actually, you touched on this a little bit when you said, I don't know how old this is or what iteration this is of, this part of Torah, these rituals. But that's a little bit of what I'm thinking about is, in the Odyssey, there's a scene where, Odysseus and his comrades, they actually enter Hades, the underworld. And so there's this very literal entering, contact with, entering into this liminal space. They have contact with, people who are there, the spirits. They communicate with them. When they leave, they then go to the island of Circe. They hold a proper funeral for their friend. It is so in that sense, it is very, very literal. This, by contrast, is, in a way, it is kind of similar. It's connected in some way. We have had contact with, this other space, this other part of existence. And now we have to separate ourselves from it, from what that means. That's such a primeval kind of impulse to me. And in that way, I feel like these are the things that connect us in our very core to what it is to be human. That is in part what I love so much about this.
Yeah, me too.
It feels when we read this that it is so ancient.
Yeah. And so big and so fundamental, right?
Fundamental.
We have forgotten this. We have forgotten the power of life and death.
Right.
And we have
wanting to go right back to work after somebody dies. Right. And I say to this, I'll say to this, somebody, if they work for, no, I want you to take a day, please. Please, you have days, please take a day. Something has happened. Please sit with it. It's just sit with it and don't come back for it.
So the thing I want to point out about you're talking about how fundamental this is, and as a cultural anthropology person, I 100% agree. This is terrestrial human culture. I love that Torah goes there. What I want to say though is that some cultures worship death, right? So the Egyptian culture glorified death. Some religious instincts and impulses are all about when we die and are sitting at the right hand of God. It doesn't matter what happens in this world. What matters is, right, I will be sitting with Jesus or whatever, or I'll have 70 virgins awarded to me in the world to come. That for me, it's really important that what Torah is saying is human life here is the most important thing, the most sacred thing, because when it's gone and you have the physical remains, you don't mummify them and glorify them and build a pyramid around them. You have to purify yourself after having been around them, because a dead person is the most disruptive reality there is, because it's all about life. Torah is affirming life. And you have to deal with the fact that you've had contact with death and life, right? I love that. I just love that. like you, like it's ancient, old stuff that stays with us eternally. And it's a perspective on life that I value so much about our tradition, that human life is taken this seriously. Nobody is unimpactful. Nobody. That means the crazy homeless, person suffering homelessness in Santa Monica, their corpse contamination is just as powerful as, Gandhi's. Every human being communicates corpse contamination to the same degree. I think that is a radical statement about life and about the human being. All right. So Alex, what did you mean by why this parsha now?
I actually had a few questions. So one was, what does this mean in the context of war? And two, I'm just wondering, in the context of the portion, why is this in the placement, in the context of the story? Like, why are we here now? And why,
So I love that you are a student of Torah now who asks that question. Why here? Why now? That is somebody who's been studying Torah. I love it. I love it. I love it. Why here? Why now? So sometimes the rabbis don't say why, but what they'll say is, what's the connection that it's here now? Funny you should ask, Alex. What happens right after chapter 19, chapter 20, chapter 21? What occurs there? The deaths of Miriam and Aaron. Rachel, me too. That's what I did. That's the other reason I was drawn to this. The people are given a way to address the seriousness of the disruption of death in life, just as they are going to confront the deaths of their leaders. Because death is bad enough, but often we hold leaders to a place of they won't die. Even though we know that's not true, we kind of treat it that way. And certainly for ourselves, right? We can't go there. We just can't. That cognitive dissonance is usually too much for us. We don't go there. I'm actually imagining ourselves not existing, right? But Torah is clear that we have to. It's going to be every one of us. And it's going to be even Aaron, Miriam, and Moshe. We do not have a leader, even the paragon of Jewish or Israelite, whatever, holiness, whatever, like righteousness, dies. We do not have a tradition that has any human being not die, even Moshe. And remember, our tradition does not tell us where Moshe is buried. Why, right? We've talked about this before, but I think in this context, it's really important. We're not told where he's buried, so nobody goes to try to find his grave and use it as any kind of focal point. Now, the mystics in Sfat lay themselves on the graves of Hasidic masters to absorb their juju. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist within Judaism. It does, but it's not normative. What's normative is even Moshe dies. The greatest Rebbe will die. All of us will die. So I think the rabbis tie it to this commandment of how to deal with the disruption of death in life right before the leaders of the people are going to die. Bert?
How does Yisker fit in with all this spiritually?
Yeah. I think for me, the way it functions is sort of like this, that as you come to your festivals and you are commanded to rejoice, the rabbis get it. But for those of us who have lost people, it isn't pure joy anymore. It can't be. V'samachta b'chagecha v'hayita ach sameach. You shall rejoice in your festivals, and you shall be ach sameach, only happy. The rabbis know that's not possible. And they are the ones who give us Yisker at every festival. Because if we're going to be commanded to rejoice, okay, but they also make sure we have time to deal with the disruption of the death of somebody at that time of celebration. And that's Yisker. And it's why it's so powerful for me. And, it's why I insist on doing it every time, like leading it for us, because I'm so deeply connected to the wisdom of at your time of greatest spiritual celebration and of physical things like the harvest or whatever, we are to take time to confront death and loss.
Well, we don't do it over the body. We do it in community.
Yes. And
Generally at a different place.
Right. Well, there are rituals around the body,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we have a shomer, we have somebody who sits with the body at all times, because the body's not to be left alone. It's to be respected. It's not to be looked at. You're not allowed to look at a dead body because the person has no control over who's seeing them. That's why we don't do open caskets, because it's considered an indignity to the dead person to have their body on display. So there are things that are involved with the corpse. And when we do tahara, when we purify a body for burial, those of us who have served on a Heber Kadisha, when you deal with a corpse and you're washing it for burial, you speak to it. So you say, we're about to turn you over so that we may wash your back. And we're sorry if in any way we are disturbing you. And you're supposed to be gentle and you speak to the person. You don't just do stuff to the body. You're to respect it as if the person is still there in some way. They're still a person, even though they're dead. And
we don't parade them. We don't parade them down the street.
We do not parade them down the street. Or if we do, not parade, but when I'll never forget when I was living in Israel. That's when Yitzchak Rabin of blessed memory was murdered. And I was on my way from Jerusalem to Beersheba to study, because I would go to Jerusalem every week to hang out with people. And we got news. It was a public bus that goes between cities. And we got news that his casket was on the way. And every single bus driver and every single car pulled over. Without being told what to do, all of us silently got off the bus. Everyone got out of their cars, and we all stood in silence until the motorcade passed. It was a good 5 to 7 minutes before the motorcade came. No one spoke. And it was this incredible moment of respect and communal mourning, and was so Jewish to me, just so Jewish. Like, we heard his body was coming, so everything stopped to be able to pay respects to his casket as it in the motor. So it's a mix of, we don't parade it, but we don't ignore that this is his body, or a body, right, that deserves respect. And I love the stream of consciousness of Judaism. You're kind of getting the Dostoevsky version of Torah study here. And a funeral procession, if a funeral procession and a wedding procession both come to an intersection, the wedding procession takes priority. So as much as we respect, respond to, and acknowledge the impact of the death of a human being, of death in life, of contact with death in life, and how disruptive it should be to us, ultimately, when the funeral procession and the wedding procession are both, somebody has to stop for the other one to cross, the funeral procession stops and the wedding procession goes first. Because ultimately, it's about affirming life. Ultimately, that's where Judaism comes down. And for me, again, that is one of the most beautiful things about our tradition, is that we have this seriousness around how we treat a corpse, how we treat someone's memory for Yizkor, how we deal with Shiva and a family sitting Shiva, all of that stuff, because we know how precious life is. And it's all about the sanctity of life. And may we all, this Shabbat and coming week, live in such a way that we truly honor the gift of being given these incredible bodies to live in, that our neshama, our spirit, our soul, our minds, all of that gets to walk around in these organic forms for a little while, is the greatest blessing anyone could experience. Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.